So imagine your fabulous cruise has been interrupted by your cruise ship sinking. Everybody's gone except you, and you make it to a desert island. There's nothing else on there, and you're hoping to get rescued, and the only thing you were able to save was a little water, a box of matches, and a precious Picasso painting that had been rolled up in a tube. Nobody knows why you saved that as opposed to, say, food or a life raft, but that's what you have on this desert island. And as you're sitting there and the night's getting colder and colder because it happened to be one of those cruises that goes to where it's cold, you're having to decide for yourself, if I make a signal fire, somebody might see me, but the only thing you have to make a fire with is the precious Picasso. What do you do? Well, obviously you know what you do. You would choose to torch Picasso in a second, and he's gone. Sure, you're going to make it in the papers as the guys that burned Picasso up, but you saved your life, and that's what's important. It's that sort of dilemma that Abraham Maslow came to appreciate when he was thinking about what is it that's most important to us. If it had been in the middle of New York City and someone had handed you a Picasso painting, obviously you'd sell it to the nearest fence for a couple $1,000. But in reality, when it comes down to your survival needs, it all becomes clear. And Maslow saw that to be the truth. As a matter of fact, when he began studying it, he realized that we aren't just driven by a few needs, and in fact, we have a fairly efficient and sometimes even ruthless system of deciding what's most important in our lives at what time. Some of this is decided by our level of development and how old we are. Some of it's determined by our circumstances and what's most important to us. But in general, Maslow saw that there was a level of the needs that took place in our lives. And he called them a hierarchy. That is, that when one was satisfied, we could begin dealing with the other ones. And that only in times of stress, like on our desert island, would you have to make the hard choices between survival and, say, more artistic needs. So here are Maslow's levels that he talked about, his hierarchy of needs. Level 1, the physiological needs: air, water, elimination of waste, food, biological reproduction. All of those are physiological imperatives, and they need to be dealt with. If you're not able to breathe, you're not able to live, nothing else matters. So that was pretty much the basic level where we all started. Number 1, physiological needs. And he also saw, by the way, that when you had a deficit in any of those needs, there was almost an instinctual mechanism in our bodies that said that we needed to address that need. So that studies had been done that when people were deprived of vitamin C and given the chance to drink orange juice, they instinctually went to the orange juice because they knew they needed it. That filled the need that they had at the time. Physiological needs. Second, safety and security needs. That is, that once you've dealt with the basic needs to keep your body going, the next level of needs that you had was the need for safety and security, to have a place to live, to make sure that the place you lived wasn't going to be attacked by the cavemen down the road, things like that. And that we had that to sort of take care of ourselves second. So the second level, after we knew that we had our body needs taken care of, was that we're going to stay safe now that we've taken care of the food and water. Third, the love and belonging needs. And he saw these as real needs, but that the belongingness was an important factor in human life, that you can't do without it, that it's a real need that we had, and that it's an ongoing thing, and that it is possible to feel as though we've taken care of those needs. And we'll talk about how he could tell that in a second. But the belonging needs, the needs for love and security, and you see that by people joining groups and clubs, things like that. That reaching out to other people to fulfill those belonging needs are an important part of our socialization, and it's a need that we have although not as important as the physiological and the safety needs. And then the fourth needs were the esteem needs, that once we had taken care of our basic body needs, and once we'd taken care of the fact that we were safe, once we felt like we belonged to a group, were loved by others around us, that the need for feeling respect was important, and that came in two levels. The lower esteem needs, that is, the respect of others around us, and that is for status, fame, glory, how other people see us. And then also the higher esteem needs, that is, for self-respect. And he saw that as a higher level of that, as far as confidence, competence, achievement, mastery, things that we look at within ourselves. It was a higher level because it was harder to take away. As long, once you felt like you had dealt with and saw yourself as competent and as having mastery, that you couldn't take it away from somebody once you had it. Whereas, fame, glory, that's a fleeting thing. Those four levels, the first four, physiological, safety, belonging, and esteem needs, he saw those as deficit needs, or D needs, and he called them D needs. And he saw them as that because they were ones that went away when the deficit of them was taken care of. You only knew you had the need when you were lacking whatever was there. You only eat when you're hungry. You only need to breathe when you need air, which is every few seconds, but you only need, and you really notice it if you get plunged in a pool and held underwater. You only notice that you need to eat when you haven't done it for a while. You only notice the lack of safety when you're, in downtown Brooklyn after dark and all of the people are coming out of the alleyways looking like they're packing heat. And you're feeling a little unsafe at that point, and you're feeling the deficit, D needs. So whenever it's gone is when we notice we need it. And whenever you fill the need, then the need for that goes away. He called that, by the way, homeostasis. That is the sort of principle that our thermostats work on. Whenever the temperature drops below a certain level, the air conditioner kicks on. When it comes up to the proper level, it quits. And the same happens, the same regulatory mechanism happens with us. The homeostasis is that when we feel as though we've achieved belongingness, when we have the love that we feel we need, we quit having to reach out for that. So, the D needs. But there was another level beyond that, and that is the level of self-actualization. A little trickier to come by with that because we see all of the first four levels as being a normal thing that we all deal with. Self-actualization was the sort of the next thing up. And as a matter of fact, he even recognized that that was a different level of need. He called those the B, or being needs, that went along with self-actualization. And when he looked at self-actualization, he couldn't look at the direct needs that we saw happening. He saw instead that there were people that seemed to have gone up the next level and to deal with life on a different level, and he saw that as self-actualization. As a matter of fact, he went through and he did biographical sketches of people that he felt as though had reached this self-actualization. People like Thomas Jefferson, Albert Einstein, Eleanor Roosevelt, Jane Addams, the people that had lived extraordinary lives. And he saw them as having certain characteristics that he saw as being self-actualization. That is, they were reality-centered. They looked at life as it was. They were problem-centered. They didn't get lost in the problem itself. They looked at the difficulties as problems to be solved, which they did, and they didn't get stopped by that. They enjoyed autonomy and independence. They resisted being enculturated, being sucked into the larger culture. They were able to say no, and they had an unhostile sense of humor. They didn't laugh at other people's expense, but they could see the joy in life as it was. They had a great acceptance of self and others. And they had a certain spontaneity and simplicity of life. They didn't clutter themselves up. They also showed a great humility and respect. And they had what he called Gemeinschaftsgefühl, or human kinship, a kinship with all life. And they didn't see any hostility in the greater world. And he saw these aspects as being important in their being able to live on the higher level. Now, obviously, this wasn't something that everybody exhibited. As a matter of fact, only a few percent of the population had this self-actualization, but it was something he felt like, with proper consciousness of our journey through the hierarchy of needs, we could recognize within ourselves. And young people could be taught toward self-actualization. That was something that we could move people toward. And that goes to another thing that's important to recognize about Maslow, was that he was basically a humanistic and optimistic researcher into the human condition. He saw that there was possibility to move people beyond the lower levels to a higher plane, and he saw that as possible with everybody. So the optimism and the humanism that he saw as part and parcel of the human package is an important thing to recognize about Maslow. Very quickly, another thing you'll encounter with Maslow is something called meta needs. That is, once you dealt with the lower needs, you saw that there were higher needs that dealt with the B needs, the self-actualization needs, things like truth, goodness, beauty, unity, aliveness, uniqueness, things that we see as adding to our human journey. And there were also meta-pathologies, things that when we had those meta-needs deprived, that we would have them, they'd show up in those ways, things like depression, despair, disgust, alienation. So the meta-pathologies and the meta-needs are things you need to remember as far as Maslow, because he dealt with those. So let's talk about some questions you might encounter about Mr. Maslow or Dr. Maslow. Number one. According to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what will make a job most satisfying? A job will be more satisfying if it provides belonging, need, and self-esteem. In other words, it should provide more than just the basic physiological needs. So the more satisfying, the higher level of need it fulfills. What is the third level in Maslow's hierarchy of needs? And that would be the belongingness and love level of need. According to Maslow's hierarchy, what is the first thing that school should fulfill as far as needs go? What's the first thing a school should do? And of course, it should have free lunch. It should provide for the physiological needs. Free lunch, readily available bathrooms, a good environment, the basic needs. You've got to deal with level 1 first before you move on. Number 4, what is one thing a teacher could do to help students achieve self-actualization? Well, they could give them a chance to explore on their own. They could give them a chance to feel empowered in their educational journey. They could allow students to be creative. All of those things are things that will head a child toward self-actualization in Maslow's thought. Question number 5. What is Maslow's 5th stage? And that would be self-actualization. And number 6. According to Maslow, esteem needs are met how? They're met by finding respect from others and finding a way to achieve self-respect. So all of those are ways in which you can help study for Maslow. One more thing to think about when you're looking at Maslow is that there were also cognitive and aesthetic needs. He didn't have those as levels, and as a matter of fact, in your studies, you'll see that there are several places where those are put. But you can best think of those as ways to go from level 4 to level 5, because we don't, when we're dealing with our esteem needs and when we're dealing with the self-actualization needs, those cognitive, that is the need to understand and know, and the aesthetic needs, the needs for beauty, which, by the way, would have kept you from burning Picasso's painting there on the island had you really been, self-actualized, are ones where you are able to move from one level to the next. So, quickly review. 5 levels in Maslow: physiological, safety and security, belonging and love, esteem, and self-actualization. PSBES, or poetic singers boldly embrace song. And to repeat, PSBES, poetic singers boldly embrace song. A little mnemonic to help you there when you're sitting down and trying to get all 5 levels. And that's what you need to know. Good luck.